Mountain bikes are made to fit a wide range of human beings. You can cut down your handlebars, adjust your stack, raise or lower your saddle, make countless adjustments to your suspension, or you could even buy a bike that's your size. They range from extra small to extra large. That's 5 sizes. But you know what's interesting? Most mountain bikes come with the same friggin' cranks. Across all sizes, they only range by about 5 millimeters, 170 or 175. Probably doesn't matter, right? Well, as it turns out, you'd only need to ride 14 miles a week to make your cranks go around 1 million times over the course of a year. That's 1 million revolutions where something might be suboptimal, and if it is, that's suboptimal times 1 million. So why then would bike companies who obsess over a half-degree head tube angle change be sweeping crank length under the rug? It's the cost. Let's be realistic here. You're a bike company and you're trying to build bikes as competitively as possible. So when you're buying not just cranks, but an entire group set, you only want 2 crank sizes because any more and it's gonna get more expensive. Now as a consumer, are you willing to pay more for a bike with 170 cranks because the medium has 165s? No. You're gonna go to a competitor and get the same components for less. And so these 2 crank sizes provide plenty of leverage and they fit the vast majority of people well enough. Ignorance is bliss. I was perfectly happy with my 170s until I tried 165s and then 155s. And it's not just smaller people that are switching to shorter cranks. In Bentonville, I shot a game of bike with Eric Porter. It's gonna be up on his channel. I had a new bike with 170 millimeter cranks, and his bike had 165s. I don't know if you know this, but Eric Porter is a lot taller than me. And so I've since swapped those cranks for 155s. Nico turned me onto a company called 5Dev. All of their cranks are made by CNC, and so they can make as many sizes as they want without altering the cost like you would with a mold. But they're not the only ones working on shorter cranks. Cane Creek just released electric wings, which are basically Eewings in 160 millimeters made for e-bikes. A lot of e-bikes come with shorter cranks.
E-bikes is interesting because as you're pedaling, it's a little harder to sense where your pedal stroke is in relation to the ground or obstacles on the trail. There's a lot of opportunity for aftermarket e-bike cranks. That's probably one of the most common applications for these short cranks, because on an e-bike you have the motor doing all the torque for you. You don't need the leverage of the crank to do it. So you can run a shorter crank, get more clearance to the ground, pedal everywhere through the whole turn, over rocks, and not worry about pedal strikes.
But it's not just about ground clearance. See, we can simulate a shorter crank by dropping my saddle here, and you can see at the top of the pedal stroke, my knee is making this highly acute angle that's kind of strenuous and not very efficient. And so with shorter cranks, I'm able to pedal in these tighter, more efficient circles. My legs aren't bunching up as much, and I can deliver power more effectively. But you might point out, there's less leverage. And you would be completely right. If you are switching from a longer crank to a shorter crank, there's less leverage and there's no way around it unless you want to make your legs longer. And I don't recommend you do that. What a lot of people do end up doing is going down in size on their front chainring. Now what that does is decrease the gearing of the entire bike, and then you gotta spin faster to go to the same speed. But pedaling at a higher cadence shifts the focus from muscular endurance to cardiovascular endurance, which for many riders can be more efficient. If you've ever ran a long distance versus carried a refrigerator for a long distance, you know this to be true. Our cardiovascular system is generally more capable of a prolonged effort than our muscular system is. And in my case, smaller circles also mean my hips move less. With longer cranks, my hips were moving everywhere. Now I'm shifting my whole body around and it's not doing anything to help the bike go forwards. Less body movement is better, it's more efficient. So shorter cranks increase ground clearance, reduce strain on your joints. They can make your pedaling more efficient. And in many cases, they make your body move less, which is also more efficient. Let's not forget they can also reduce spinning weight, unless you just change your carbon cranks to aluminum ones like I just did. Are there any downsides to changing to shorter cranks? Well, yeah, as I already mentioned, you have reduced leverage with shorter cranks, and regardless of your gear ratio, that can affect your sprinting performance or any time you need a sudden burst of power. And let's not also forget that gearing down means you may also be losing some top end. You're also going to need to adjust the height of your saddle to compensate for the crank arm being higher off the ground. It's only a little bit, but I don't like that. The lower your saddle, the better off you are generally when you're jumping or descending, and so every little bit counts. You've also got to spend the money on shorter cranks, possibly a new chain ring, and then hope it works out for the better. But for many riders, even considering the downsides, it's a worthwhile decision, even for taller riders. But why is this happening now? It's true, we're seeing this a lot right now. These Appleman cranks are actually made to allow you to test crank sizes. There are 6 sizes, all the way from 175 down to 100, all in the same crank arm. You just change the position of the pedal and you can test it. Ingenious products like these are often the result of manufacturing technologies becoming more accessible. Companies can prototype rapidly using 3D printing, and the cost of CNC continues to get lower and lower. And the internet provides a platform for marketing niche products. And so where previously a large company would have to do a big product launch, smaller companies are bucking trends daily. It's also worth noting that when 170 and 175 millimeter cranks became the norm, bottom brackets were a lot higher. Modern enduro bikes, on the other hand, are pretty low slung, and so ground clearance is becoming a pretty high priority. So there's no shortage of reasons to try shortening your cranks. If you want to, where do you start? Well, one way you could do it is buy a bunch of different size crank arms and test them back to back. I think that's all what we're trying to avoid. But there are better ways. Remember those Appleman cranks? These are actually available for rent. You can rent them for $50 and you can actually install them on your bike. They're solid. You can ride with them. You can shred and actually test how different crank sizes feel. And like I said, these go from 100 millimeters all the way up to 175. And so you're gonna have a pretty good idea of what crank size works for you. And it seems like a lot of people have been taking them up on this because even the rentals are out of stock. There's also the 5-dev crotchometer, which uses your inseam to calculate crank length. That'll run you about $200 unless you know a dealer who already has one. But you don't need a set of test cranks or a crotchometer to find a good starting point. All you need are a few supplies and 6th grade math. This is the crotch sandwich method of measuring crank length. You're gonna need a box or a telephone book, textbook, something shaped kind of like this, a metric ruler or meter stick, and like I said, 6th grade mathematics. You're gonna start with your shoes on and your back against the wall. So you're gonna take this thing and put it up underneath your crotch and push it up like it's a bike saddle. Then you're gonna take your tape measure and measure down to the floor, to the top of the box thingy. I'm getting 74 centimeters. To determine crank length, you're gonna get 20% of that, so multiply by 0.2. And I'm getting 14.8 centimeters or 148 millimeters. So with that, you're round to the nearest crank length. In my case, it would be 150 millimeters. Why then did I go with 155? Well, like I said, there are downsides to going with shorter cranks, and so I dialed it back up a little bit just to counteract those effects, and I don't know, it just seems crazy to go to 150 cranks. And besides, the crotch sandwich method of determining crank length is way less than perfect. If a taller rider were to use that method, they might find that they need 180 or 185 or larger, and that would just strike every single rock and root on the trail. And so if you're tall and you're happy with your cranks, don't change them. And if that method isn't good enough for you, then just be happy you're not gluing wooden blocks to your gas and brake pedals. So I actually don't always like the newest trends in mountain biking. I hate the obsession with long reach and big travel. I just like what I like, but shorter cranks is something I can get down with because I'm the size of a troll. I hope you found this video informative. I hope you learned something today, and I hope you realize that the crotch sandwich method is anything but precise. And if you didn't learn anything, I hope you were at least entertained by all this. Thanks for riding with me today, and I'll see you next time.